The first time it happened, I told myself it would never happen again. I told myself it was just a moment, just a weakness, just a spark that would fade into nothing. But the truth is, sparks ignite fires, and once that fire caught inside of me, there was no going back. I remember the heat of his hands against my skin, the way my breath caught in my throat, and the guilt that pounded in my chest louder than my heartbeat. My husband was away on a business trip, trusting me, believing in me, never questioning where my loyalty stood. And there I was, in the arms of another man. That man was not a stranger. He was our neighbor. His name was Ryan. He lived just 3 houses down, the kind of man everyone in the neighborhood waved at, the kind of man who showed up at block parties with a smile and a helping hand. My husband respected him, trusted him. Sometimes they even shared a beer together on the porch, laughing like old friends. That memory still stabs me in the gut. But before I continue, let me pause here and thank all of you watching this story. To every subscriber of this channel, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your loyalty and encouragement. And to all of you who are new or just returning, I am so grateful that you are here. I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button because your support is the fuel that keeps this channel alive. Make sure you drop your thoughts in the comments below, because I promise, after you hear this, you will have something to say. My name is Claire. I am 36 years old, born and raised in the suburbs of Ohio. I married my husband, Mark, when I was 28. Mark is the kind of man women pray for. He is steady, dependable, a man of faith, a man who has never once given me a reason to doubt his love. He works in finance, long hours at times, but always comes home with a smile and a kiss for me. He trusts me with his heart in ways that still make me ache when I think about what I did. And then there was Ryan. He was 40, divorced, charming in that effortless way that felt dangerous. He worked with his hands, construction mostly, sometimes landscaping. He carried himself with confidence, muscles that came from labor, and a grin that felt like an invitation every time he looked my way. It began so small. A conversation by the mailbox. A laugh shared over the hedge. Compliments that I should have brushed off but secretly craved. "You look beautiful today," he would say. Or, "Mark is a lucky man." Simple words, but they lit something in me that I had not felt in years. Marriage is not always fireworks. It is not always passion and desire. Sometimes it is bills, dishes, and late nights waiting for your husband to come home tired and worn. I loved Mark, but I missed feeling wanted. I missed feeling like a woman instead of just a wife. Ryan saw that emptiness, and he filled it with words, with looks, with touches that lingered a little too long. The first time we crossed the line, it was a rainy Thursday afternoon. Mark was out of town, and Ryan knocked on my door, offering to help fix a leak in the gutter. I let him in. We talked. We laughed. And then the air changed. He stood too close, his hand brushing mine as he passed me the screwdriver. My breath caught. My mind screamed no, but my body leaned in. And before I knew it, his lips were on mine. It was not gentle. It was hungry, desperate, like we had both been waiting for this moment without admitting it. I should have pushed him away. I should have stopped it. But I did not. Instead, I pulled him closer, drowning in the rush of feeling wanted, desired, alive. When it was over, I sat there shaking, my hands covering my face, tears burning in my eyes. "This cannot happen again," I whispered. He nodded, but the look in his eyes told me we were both lying. From that moment on, I was living a double life. To Mark, I was the faithful wife, cooking dinner, smiling when he walked through the door, praying with him at night. But inside, I was carrying a secret that ate at me like poison. And every time Ryan passed by my window, every time his truck pulled into his driveway, my chest tightened with temptation. I told myself it was love. That maybe Ryan was my soulmate, that maybe I had made a mistake marrying Mark. But deep down, I knew the truth. It was not love. It was lust. Lust disguised as passion, lust wrapped in stolen moments and whispered lies. What hurt the most was the way Mark trusted me. He never once doubted me. He never once looked at me with suspicion. He handed me his heart every single day, and I betrayed it in secret. That trust was a weight I carried, heavier than any guilt I had ever known. There were nights I would lay beside him, his arm wrapped around me, and I would stare at the ceiling, suffocating under the shame. His steady breathing would lull me to sleep, while my mind replayed Ryan's touch, Ryan's kiss, Ryan's voice calling my name. I told myself I could stop. That it was just a phase, just a weakness. But temptation does not disappear. It grows. It feeds on secrecy, on stolen glances, on hidden texts. And with each passing day, I sank deeper into a darkness I could not escape. By the end of that first month, I realized I was no longer just betraying my husband. I was betraying myself. And yet, I kept going. If guilt were fire, I was already burning alive. Every smile I gave Mark, every kiss goodnight, every prayer we whispered before bed, it all felt like ash in my mouth because I knew the truth. I knew what I was hiding. And the hardest part was that Ryan was only 3 houses down, his presence lingering in my thoughts day and night. I began to perfect the art of deception. I learned to silence my phone at certain hours, to delete texts before Mark could ever glance at them. I learned to control my breathing, to hide the quickened heartbeat when Ryan's name popped up on my screen. I became an actress in my own home, a woman rehearsing lines of loyalty while living a script of betrayal. Ryan made it easy to slip deeper. He was bold. He would send me messages late at night when Mark was asleep beside me. Sometimes it was just a single word, thinking. Other times it was more dangerous. Words that made my body ache, words that replayed in my head when I should have been listening to my husband talk about his day. But it was not just words. We found excuses to see each other. Quick runs to the grocery store, morning walks that turned into secret rendezvous, afternoons where he would help me with something around the house while Mark was at work. Every moment was stolen. Every kiss was a risk. Every touch was another crack in the life I had built with Mark. The thrill was intoxicating. I will not lie about that. The danger, the secrecy, the way my pulse raced whenever Ryan's hand found mine, it made me feel alive in ways I had not felt in years. But with every rush of adrenaline came an equal wave of shame. Because while Ryan saw me as his escape, Mark saw me as his home. I will never forget one particular night. It was a Friday. Mark came home with flowers in his hand, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw me. "Just because," he said with a smile, handing me the bouquet. I took them, my hands trembling, my heart breaking inside my chest. Because only hours earlier, Ryan had kissed me in the shadow of his garage, his lips pressing against mine like I belonged to him. And then here was Mark, steady, faithful, unsuspecting. He kissed my cheek, thanked me for dinner, and prayed with me before bed, his voice calm and sure as he thanked God for our marriage, for our love, for me. It was in that moment, lying in the dark, that I realized I was not only betraying Mark, I was betraying God. The faith I had built my life upon, the vows I had made at the altar, the prayers I claimed to believe, they all mocked me in that silence. But still, I did not stop. The lies began to grow heavier, harder to keep straight. I would forget what I had told Mark about where I had been. I would stumble over details, covering them with nervous laughter. And Mark, bless his trusting heart, never pushed too hard. He believed me, always. That trust was the sharpest knife of all. The guilt began to change me. I snapped at Mark more easily. I grew restless in conversations, impatient in routines. I told myself it was stress, that it was nothing, but the truth was that my double life was rotting me from the inside out. Ryan noticed the change, too. "You are overthinking it," he would say, pulling me close. "Mark will never know. We are careful." But I was not so sure anymore. There were close calls. Times when Mark would come home earlier than expected, and I would panic, rushing to erase any trace of Ryan's presence. Times when neighbors would glance too long, as if they suspected something. Times when Ryan's boldness scared me, his hand brushing mine in public, his words a little too suggestive when others could hear. Every close call made my stomach twist, but instead of stopping, I sank deeper. Because that is the truth about sin, it never satisfies, it only demands more. And then came the night that nearly shattered everything. It was late. Mark had gone to bed, exhausted from work. I slipped downstairs, my phone buzzing in my hand. It was Ryan. "Come outside," his text read. Against every warning in my head, I obeyed. I stepped onto the porch, my heart racing, the night air cool against my skin. There he was, leaning against his truck, his grin pulling me in like a magnet. "I could not sleep," he said. "I needed to see you." We stood too close, whispered too softly, laughed too freely. And then his hand found my waist, pulling me against him. My breath caught, my body betraying me once again. His lips met mine, hungry, reckless. And then a light flicked on in my house. Mark. My heart nearly stopped. I pulled away, shoving Ryan back, my eyes wide with panic. "Go," I whispered harshly. "Please, go." He hesitated, then climbed into his truck, the engine roaring louder than my heartbeat as he drove away. I stood frozen, my legs trembling, until I heard Mark's voice behind me. "Claire. What are you doing out here?" I turned, forcing a smile, my voice shaky. "I could not sleep," I said quickly. "The air, it helps." He studied me for a moment, his eyes searching, but then he nodded slowly. "All right. Come back to bed." And just like that, he trusted me again. That was the night I realized how close I was to losing everything. But instead of stopping, instead of confessing, I found myself torn even more. Because part of me wanted to run back into Mark's arms, to cling to his love, to beg for forgiveness. But another part, the part that craved Ryan's fire, was not ready to let go. And so, I lived between two worlds. One built on trust, the other on lies. One steady and safe, the other wild and consuming. But deep down, I knew, a choice was coming. It was only a matter of time before the walls caved in. I had been balancing on a rope stretched thin between two worlds, and the rope finally snapped. The moment of reckoning came on a Sunday morning, of all days. I remember it so vividly. The sunlight poured through the kitchen window, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Mark was seated at the table, his Bible open, as he often did before church. I was at the counter, my phone buzzing silently against the wood. It was Ryan. Again. Mark's eyes lifted just as I reached for it. "You have been on that phone a lot lately," he said softly, not accusing, but curious. Something in his tone made my stomach twist. I laughed too quickly, brushing it off, but I could feel his gaze lingering. That evening, when we came back from church, Mark set his keys on the table, his face unusually serious. "Claire," he said quietly, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest." My heart pounded so loud I thought it would break through my chest. "What is it?" He swallowed hard. "Are you seeing someone else?" The room went still. The walls felt like they were closing in. My throat closed, my hands trembling at my sides. For a moment, I thought of lying. I thought of spinning another story, weaving another cover, keeping the fragile world I had built from crumbling. But the weight of months of lies pressed down on me, and something inside me broke. Tears blurred my vision as I whispered the words that cut deeper than any knife. "Yes." Mark's face went pale. He sat back, as if I had struck him. His eyes filled with a pain I had never seen before, a pain that was raw and piercing. "Who?" he asked, his voice barely audible. And then came the second blade. "Ryan." The silence that followed was suffocating. Mark stood slowly, his hands shaking as he ran them through his hair. "My own brother," he said, his voice breaking. "You, and my brother." I tried to reach for him, but he stepped back as if my touch burned him. The tears fell freely down my face, my chest heaving with sobs. "I am so sorry," I cried. "I never meant for it to go this far. I was weak. I was foolish. Stop." His voice cracked like thunder, filled with anguish. "Do you have any idea what you have done? You did not just betray me. You betrayed us. Our family. Our faith. Everything." That night, Mark slept in the guest room. I lay awake in our bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of what I had destroyed. The flowers he had given me weeks earlier were still on the nightstand, wilted, their petals falling one by one. It was as if they mocked me, reminding me of the love I had trampled. The days that followed were a blur of silence and shattered trust. Mark avoided me, his eyes hollow, his words clipped. Ryan stopped calling, stopped texting, as if the reality of what we had done had finally hit him too. I was left alone with the wreckage, choking on guilt so heavy I could barely breathe. One night, unable to bear it anymore, I dropped to my knees in the living room. Tears soaked the carpet as I cried out to God. "I have destroyed everything. I do not deserve forgiveness. But please, please, if there is any way, heal what I have broken. Heal him. Heal me. I cannot fix this without you." It was the most desperate prayer I had ever prayed. And though the room was silent, I felt something stir deep within me, a whisper, a reminder, that grace still existed, even for me. But grace did not erase consequences. Mark eventually confronted me, his eyes heavy with hurt. "I cannot look at you without seeing him," he said. "I do not know how to move past this." I told him the truth, that I had cut all ties with Ryan, that I wanted to rebuild, that I was willing to do whatever it took to earn back his trust. He listened, but the wound was deep. Weeks turned into months. Counseling sessions, raw conversations, nights of tears and silence. Slowly, painfully, we began to stitch together what I had torn apart. There were setbacks, moments when anger flared, when trust wavered, but there were also glimpses of hope. One night, Mark sat across from me, his Bible open once again. He looked at me with tired eyes, but softer this time. "I cannot do this on my own," he admitted. "But I believe God can help us." It was the first olive branch, the first spark of light in the darkness. We prayed together that night, broken, trembling, unsure. But in that moment, I felt a shift. Not instant healing, not erasure of pain, but the first step toward redemption. I wish I could say everything went back to normal overnight. It did not. Trust is not rebuilt in a day. Love does not erase betrayal with a single word. But little by little, Mark chose to try. And I chose to fight for him, for us, with everything I had left. Looking back now, I realize this: betrayal is a fire that burns everything in its path. But even ashes can be fertile ground if you let God breathe life into them. I betrayed the man who trusted me with his heart. I shattered him. But by the grace of God, and by the strength of forgiveness, we found a way to rebuild, not perfectly, but honestly. To anyone listening who feels trapped in lies, or burdened by guilt, or convinced that your failure has defined you, I want you to know this. You are not beyond redemption. What is broken can be mended. What is lost can be found again. If God could take my ashes and turn them into something new, He can do the same for you. Trust Him. Surrender to Him. And let Him write the ending that you cannot write on your own.